Welcome to another episode of Toot Your Own Horn Music Matters. I am here with the wonderful Ray Grant. Welcome, Ray. So happy to have you here.
Lisa, I've been anxious to speak with you. Congratulations on all that you have done for clarinetists and musicians worldwide.
Well, you're very kind. I am doing this mostly because I want to see people who don't play the clarinet or the flute or the saxophone or some wind instrument. And so we're hoping that we will entice more people into music. That's the goal.
Terrific. Well, I am the product of a public school education, and sadly, I'm a great advocate of music education, as you know, and sadly, the days of when I was in elementary school in third grade, I remember it vividly. A music teacher opened up the closet and said, "What instrument do you want to play?" And this is in New York City. And at the time, Lisa, New York City had 1 million students, had 1,000 schools, 32 school districts. Nearly every one of them had music in the schools. Today, 2 districts have music programs in the schools.
Jeez, that's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And it absolutely changed my life. And it helped a bit that I had a public school clarinet teacher that lived next door to me, and a very gifted, clarinetist. But it started a career, and while I got into the career, I found I was a bit better at bringing people into the concert hall than performing simply on the stage for them. But had I not been trained as a musician, gone to music school, entered graduate clarinet performance, I don't believe I could have had the respect of other musicians, whether that's at the New York Chamber Symphony at the 92nd Street Y or the American Symphony Orchestra, or for that matter, the symphonies that I engaged and commissioned work for when I was artistic director of the Olympic Movement.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that's really interesting. I think you're onto something there. I think musicians have a really tough time working for or underneath leadership that doesn't have a really strong artistic or creative or musical background.
Oh, I could not agree more. If you don't have the respect of the musicians, you've lost it from day one, because how could you possibly then discuss why it's important to perform Mozart time and time and time again, and have those discussions with artistic administrators, with music directors, with musicians themselves. And I keep in touch with those musicians after all of these years. And New York was a great training ground because it was made up of freelance musicians. And so they played classical music on Sundays. They played in the Broadway Pit. They were in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. And so you could just throw a sheet of music in front of them and they could play it down and get ready to record it. And had you not had the ability of being able to read a score and be able to suggest, okay, I think we could get this done with 3 rehearsals, because money is always an issue, in the arts, as opposed to 4 or 5 or 6 rehearsals, you'd be dead in the water.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back and talk just briefly about your commitment to music before your vast experience working in the field. What was it that made you stick to it? Why didn't you go into a different pathway earlier on? What made you say, I want to pursue this?
It was a single experience. And I was in the 7th grade, and my band director at the time nominated a couple of us to be in the all-state band. And I think we were in Westchester County. The auditions were in Scarsdale. They were intense auditions, and I got selected for the all-state band. And we went to that concert after the rehearsals, actually recorded the concert. I still have the LP of that performance. I remember performing, I remember performing the pavane, the four-a pavane. And I never thought music could sound that way because I was in a high school band and I thought I was good. And to see all of the great musicians in New York, I said I had to be a part of this. But then what made me stay in the field was a substantive internship I had after I started graduate school in clarinet performance. I decided to take some time off, and I had a wonderful internship in arts administration at the John F. Kennedy Center. Which I don't know if we could be political on your podcast or if you could edit it out, but I am so sad to see the diminution of what's happened to the Kennedy Center. Imagine this, Lisa. The artistic director of the Kennedy Center when I was there was Marta Stolman, the widow of Pablo Casals. We had in every nook and cranny ensembles playing all of the time. And it gave me a taste of how I could bring people into and expose them to music and performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a true thing. And I think it's going to take a lot of grassroots effort, and a lot more new people coming into it and being hobby focused, right? We need more people. We've got a lot of professional musicians in relationship to those who are not. We need a lot more, that want to participate, I think. I don't know if it's going to fix the Kennedy Center, but I do know that that's one of the missing links here for sure.
Well, and when I think about it too, because I've been active in raising a lot of money for art education, and just think of this: when I was the general manager of the American Symphony Orchestra, there were 52 full-time orchestras in the country. Today we've got 13, 14, 15. I'm lucky to live in Utah. I went to a performance last night of Mahler's Titan Symphony No. 1. Gorgeous performance, of it. So I'm lucky to be in a place, and I treat Salt Lake like an island. I get off of it frequently, but many communities don't have that opportunity. And if we don't have orchestras going into schools and introducing young people to music, as you and I both know, you don't wake up when you're 40 years old and suddenly love the opera.
Right. Yeah, especially if you've had no exposure to it. You might if you've had some exposure, but if you've had no exposure, definitely not. That's what I say. And pop music today, I mean, it's a silly thing. I was listening to the Addams Family, just watching a TV show, right, with the Addams Family, and there was such original music. There was bass clarinet and flute and timpani and cymbals and all kinds of musical sounds in that little program. That was just a fun little program. And so many of the TV shows back in the day used to have, true, real musicians playing alongside of the art form. And today we have none of that. We have. It's all digitized, and all of our music is digitized, and it's like
absolutely. My friends in Local 802, the Musicians Union in New York, they voted to go on strike. I had a friend of mine who was a bass player, gifted bass player in the American Symphony Orchestra, but he also was a freelance musician. He retired from a chorus line. The chorus line ran so long that he was able to retire from a chorus line. And of course, he's represented on all of the great recordings that we made. I don't know anyone today who pays attention to the Grammy Awards and classical music, and that was the coin of the realm. When I, with the American Symphony Orchestra, got a Grammy nomination for the music of Morton Gould, I was ecstatic. And those were in the days where WQXR was the classical radio station of the New York Times. No longer.
Right. What do you think are the pillars of how it eroded? What caused it? What are some of the building blocks you think from all your vast experience between Kennedy Center and American Symphony and so many experiences you've had? What What do you think has caused, what are the things that stand out to you?
Uh, I, I for years have felt that this focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic from a very early age, as opposed to the humanities, in including art history and music and the like, which could create lifelong learners, has been missing for such a long time. And then the pressures of teachers to teach to the test. I think those two things. I have two young boys. One's a junior at Princeton. Another one is a firefighter in Salt Lake City. But they both went to choir schools in the English tradition of choir schools. They no longer play instruments, but they are love music theory and attend and the like, but they've been given an entirely arts and culture and humanities education. They could talk about any subject, and that pressure to perform to the test, I think, has been a downfall of education.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I totally agree with that. I also feel as though many of the music programs or advanced forms of study really neglected to figure out how they could ensure that musicians were employed.
No question about it. I mean, I remember, again, I don't mean to spend so much time on New York, but I mean, the entire, when I was in New York, the entire budget for the National Endowment for the Arts was the price of a single F-16, one plane. Um, but the Department of Cultural Affairs in New York City was building buildings specifically for musicians because they couldn't afford the rent in New York. And so you had bastions of cities who still have a commitment to the arts, but it has become so much more difficult. And I'm not suggesting it's been a death knell, but COVID has wreaked havoc on our industry.
Yeah. COVID did a lot of damage to an industry that was already struggling, and it just made it that much worse, without a doubt. I do think, though, that I've been in the industry, in the musical product space for 43 years, and I can tell you that COVID finally unlocked something in musicians that I had never seen before, because I have been advocating for more opportunities. I've been advocating for more training for a long, long time. I helped build a program at DePaul University where I did that. And what I consistently found is musicians were resistant because, unfortunately and fortunately, they've been taught by very talented teachers that have had a very narrow focus, because those teachers have been able to make a living playing or teaching and not having to be in a position where they had to do anything else. And because they didn't have those skills and the next generations needed them, they were sort of shoved aside as being not essential. And that really played havoc, because so many people thought, well, I have to play the lottery, and if I get lucky enough to win, great. But if I don't, I'm going to keep trying until I can't do it anymore. And that wasn't a good strategy.
I couldn't agree more. A good friend of mine was the longtime president of Juilliard, Joe Polisi. And we would have many discussions together. It was in New York at the 92nd Street Y. And in one of his either stronger or weaker moments, he says, Ray, there are days in which I think what we're doing is immoral, because less than 1% of the people who will graduate from Juilliard today will ever find work in the field. Now, Juilliard was graduating all of those violinists who wanted to be the principal violin of the New York Philharmonic. And they disdained chamber music for that matter. And that had to change as well, especially because we have so few symphony orchestras. And I loathe too the world shuddering and shuttling of music directors. I mean, I loved the time. I'm here in Utah, and Maurice Abravanel, many years ago, stayed here. He championed Mahler before Bernstein was playing Mahler, and no longer do we have any music directors like that. So they don't put down roots in the community. Right. And so, now I'll get in trouble for this, but it's not enough when the New York Philharmonic, and I've produced these concerts, when the New York Philharmonic does one concert in Central Park and one concert in Abyssinian Church. It's not enough. They need to be in the inner city. They need to be in the schools, and the musicians are for it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt for a really long time that musicians should be building careers more like community organizers and less like they're trying to win the one spot that's open, be able to be successful. Because if musicians could see that their role is to make their communities come alive, and in doing so, create momentum, they will be always employed because people will want their services and will be engaged with them. But if they work underneath the title of an organization, and not that that's a bad thing, but that they need to have a lot more independence and engagement. And I know that, orchestras and many universities have tried to increase that kind of interactivity, but that's something that has to get baked into education for musicians to think like that and be like that.
It's so well said, and I've spent some time as a academic fellow for creative engagement at a university in Utah, and it was appalling for me. I created a lovely little chamber music festival, but it was appalling to me how siloed the university is. And that does not help any of the students, because those very students who might be gifted performers need to know how to market themselves. They need to know how to read a contract. They need to know how to read more than a score. Right. And that can be taught. And it should be taught, and it should not be the purview of arts administrators like me, who were in the position of hiring many musicians, during my time.
It's funny because Don Casey, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was the Dean of DePaul when he invited me to be on the advisory board for the school and to develop a now full program that's running for musicians to be able to become entrepreneurial and to build their own entities. But one of the very first things he said to me was, I'm going to give you a class and you're going to get to teach all the freshmen, and you're going to have a big class, and he goes, you can teach them anything you want except for one thing. And I said, what's that, Dad? And Dad said, you can't teach them anything about sales. They're not interested in that.
Interesting. And Lisa, so fast forward now, if this were a few years ago, I know many musicians who are doing podcasts, who would love to be influencers. Part of COVID, they couldn't gather. But when you think of our field, what I've loved so much about our field, especially music, is that the raison d'etre is to bring an audience together in a communal setting as tight as you could get. I would love these gigs that I would create where you're never more than 19 feet from the stage. And that's the very thing that was prohibited. And I remember in New York, down by the South Street Seaport, I was asked by the president of National Westminster Bank at the time, would you create an event for some of my executives? And I thought, what could I do? So I said, how about if I created a little chamber group pulled from the American Symphony Orchestra, and I briefed all of the musicians. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give everybody a score. The executives, everybody a score, everybody a baton, everybody a recording of Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Daniela Gatti, a young conductor who I think the world of. And everyone had 1 or 2 minutes to get in front of a small chamber orchestra and conduct. And the head of National Westminster Bank got up, and I told the musicians, follow their lead. So some was yum, bum, bum. And right, it was painful. Others were right there, had studied it for 3-4 days. The head of National Westminster Bank turned to me and he says, I was a Navy pilot. And this is like being at the controls of an F-16. And so with music, we need to pull people into the power of the experience.
Yeah. How do you think, given the things you've done, we could start to do that today to bring more people that are unfamiliar with the craft into the space? We have a population that's aging, that has a disposable income, who needs to continue to flourish in life and to continue to grow their health and mental awareness. And I think music is a wonderful way to do that. How could we get more people to do that?
It's an excellent question. And I think of it in two ways. I think of it as the lifelong learner. And that's a great audience. But my Mahler performance, there weren't young people. It was all older people. So I think when we attract younger people, we've got to, and I know that this is a bit controversial, but we, in some cases, have to insist on a different programmatic perspective so that we're not constantly playing the music of dead white males. And it can't simply be the high-end soloist that bankrupts orchestras. Right. I'm convinced of that, right? And we have to get back to music directors who are part of the community, who are known to be part of the community, not flying in for 7 days and then flying back out. So I don't have all of the answers, but one of the challenges is to make it appealing price-wise. And to make it appealing, the concerts have to be shorter. The concerts can't have intermission. Some concerts can, of course. But I would get rid of some of the intermissions, and then I would make it some kind of social event, not in the hall. Right? I still believe, shut up, don't applaud between movements, read your program notes, and the like. I think there's been some success in some of these smaller lectures ahead of the concerts to try to attract the younger people, and some way to incent those younger people to bring their friends. I see them bring their friends. I have experience with the Sundance Film Festival. When I was running the Sundance Resort, it brought $97 million into the economy of the state of Utah. Young people flocked to films because they were able to discuss before and after what that film was about. I don't see that in classical music. I see people disperse. I see people leave right after the soloist to be able to get to their parking spot. And I think we need to rethink that because our patrons are getting older, and yet there's going to be a massive transfer of wealth coming. And believe me, arts and culture is not on the minds of that generation that's going to inherit an immense amount of wealth.
That's true. It's a frightening thought. It's a very frightening thought to me. What, in your experience working with the film festival, what components of that were prescribed, and what components of that did you develop that helped bring those young people in? Can you tell us more about your experience?
I sure could. Yeah. So when I became the executive director of Sundance, I was the executive director of the resort. There were several different divisions, right? There was a catalog, there was the channel, there was the festival. Festival was based in LA. I was in charge of the resort, which was Bob Redford's home in the Provo Canyon. It never had more than 33% occupancy ever during the Sundance Film Festival. So I programmed it. I programmed so that you could have a minimum of 3 days stay. You could have 10 screenings during those 3 days. We would have discussions with the filmmakers after those days, and food and drink. Right? Food and drink brought them there, loosened them up enough so that they could talk about the content of what they saw, and it added to the economic incentive and the economic development. If you created a package. I happen to think in those communities, I did this during the Olympics, if you were able to show your ticket to a cultural event, that was your free transportation to get there. I think we need to get rid of the barriers of entry. There's too many barriers of entry. It's going to be too hard to park. It's too long. I may or may not have to get dressed up. When Beethoven did his fifth or sixth symphony, I'm forgetting which one it is, and the audience stood for an encore. What did Beethoven do? He replayed a movement of the very same symphony. If you did that today, it would be blasphemy amongst a critic, if you could find a critic. The great violinist Peter Ungen once told me, music criticism to a musician should be like ornithology to a bird. Meaning, a bird is going to go on being a bird no matter who studies him. So I believe that very, very strongly. But I think we've taken it a little bit too far in terms of some aspects of concert etiquette, because young people do not think, they don't have the attention span in that way. And I don't know of a single concert in recent memory in which after the concert, the musicians gathered, even if it wasn't their own instruments, and said, for any of you young people, come to the hallway and try this. Right? I mean, how many people maybe started out as a clarinet and then became a French horn player, or started out as a violin player. I started out as a violin player and became a clarinet player. So I think it's a combination of all of the people, but my colleagues are worn out. My colleagues, Lisa, are simply worn out because the struggle just to put a concert on stage is significant, and the foundations, there's a lot of need. There's an awful lot of need out there.
I wish we could get more groups to do house concerts. I wish, whether they're symphony orchestras or high school concert bands, I wish more people would have small experiences with art forms that allow more interactivity. Because I just really feel like people fundamentally like music. They like classical music, but they have to get close to people and close to you, like physically, like they need to be close.
Yes.
Physically close.
I totally agree. It's why, for example, I don't know what happened to the wind ensemble. When's the last time you went to well, maybe you're the exception, but, not many people are going to wind ensemble concerts where you could be close, right? You could get a sense of that. There could be a living program note, right? Somebody could talk to you about what is going to, what's about to happen. And it doesn't need to be able to read the 7-page Joe Horowitz essay.
Right. Yeah, I think those things, that goes back to my community organizing theory. Like, I really feel like it really needs to everybody needs to be boots on the ground and figuring out how they can touch people. And there needs to be less, I don't know what the rules, like in American Symphony, what was it like, or how do you think about musicians being the structure of what's required from them in those ensembles? Because I look at some of these things and, my brief time playing in professional orchestras was pretty, rigid. They're very rigid, especially with subs, how
very rigid.
Very, very rigid. It's like everything's very rigid, and you don't at all feel like you can participate in a way that tries to enhance the experience, because you feel like just lucky to be there and you're grateful for the opportunity, but it's not a community experience. And I'm wondering what, for members, they have more latitude, but similar problems, I think.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. When I was at the American Symphony Orchestra, um, it was basically self-run. Not fully self-run, not like they would like it, but more like Leopold Stokowski's version of it. A lot of young people who were members of the ensemble. Thinking of the Orchestra of St. Luke's, or I'm thinking of Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. Some orchestras without a conductor, in which they're sharing some of that responsibility. They're sharing the repertoire. They're sharing, should we be playing at Caramore, or I mean, they're desperate for the gig, so I don't believe they're going to turn down the gig. But I think it's time. I didn't always think of this way because there were enormous fights with the union. And when I was producing large events in Radio City Music Hall or Madison Square Garden, there was one event. It was the 25th anniversary of Luciano Pavarotti's debut at the Met, which we did at Madison Square Garden. I had to deal with 35 different unions.
Oh my God.
I had to meet the Teamsters at 3:00 in the morning. I had to come up with a blank check. I had to ask the driver, who do you want me to make the check payable to? Frank Angelino or Dennis O'Connell?
Seriously?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And then they would take the timpani and put it on 57th Street.
Right.
Then IATSE would have to bring it into the hall, right? And then the electricians union would have to move the music stand. And that was difficult. The talent was remarkable, right? I mean, it was a gifted, trained, and talented, remarkable, talented, group of individuals. But it added to the cost of that, right? I mean, the musicians themselves had to raise their hand to move the music stand.
Oh.
That was the extreme. I'm not sure if it's the same today, but there are fewer orchestras.
Right.
If that's the case. So I'm more of an advocate of self-governance now. I think that would help.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I wish that music programs would, require some kind of business skill building. I mean, your background is not only rich in musical experience, but it's rich in all kinds of different business activities or business-like activities that caused you to be able to see in a very holistic way. And I feel like musicians are very smart by nature. They're very, very intelligent, and they don't open themselves up, I think, enough to learning. And
I totally agree, and it was not without criticism. When I was in New York at the 92nd Street Y and got approached by a headhunter to become a Walt Disney Imagineer, to create a concert hall, an outdoor amphitheater, a screening room, and the like, to create a more intimate experience rather than a theme park experience. My colleagues were besides themselves. I remember one saying, I can't believe you're going to have Mickey Mouse on your check. And yet that was an extraordinary experience, because I reported to Michael Eisner, and he turned to me and he says, what architect do you want to work with? I mean, how many? And it was Tom Beebe out of Chicago I wanted to work with. What acoustician do you want to work with? I mean, he knew the nature of intimacy and the power of that experience. And same thing with the Olympics. I made the move to the Olympics because I felt it was a world gathering. I could have done something that could have been simply a quaint little sideshow, or I could have done something through commissioning, which I consider my legacy for the games, in which whenever the work that I commissioned by Alvin Ailey is performed no matter where it is. It carries that tagline, commissioned by, my name, or the cultural Olympiad. Dance company Palobolis, dance company Alvin Ailey, music by Wynton Marsalis. It felt robust, and I thought you could do it within the context of the World Gathering of the Olympics.